Hi, I'm Shelby Stringer, and I'm part of the Wildlife Management Program here at ABAC.
And I'm one of Skates and part of the Conservation Law Enforcement track.
Together, we are both part of the School of Agriculture and Natural Resource Management Program. Today, we want to talk to you all about the Lake Baldwin project that we have developed for the Natural Resource Recreation class project.
Every year, students that are enrolled in this class work along with another teammate and a stakeholder to create, redo, or build a project that will benefit campus or the surrounding area in some way. In the past, students have built a pergola, removed invasive species, cleared fire breaks, or even made informational signs at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. Shelby and I will be working along with Corey Lovell, our stakeholder, also an ABAC alumni who graduated from the forestry tract, and the one who made the informational signs at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. Corey wanted us to develop a way to inform students and visitors about the lake's history, active and past management, fishing rules and regulations, and the wildlife that utilize the lake. Corey's goal was also to find a way to make it clear to ABAC students and guests the rules and regulations governing the lake, along with what the lake is utilized for. We will be creating a handout that covers rules and regulations and a brochure that will also cover rules and regulations, but it will go more in depth in past and active management, wildlife species that utilize the lake, and the location of the lake on ABAC campus, along with some of the lake's history. Below is the time frame from a day-to-day basis. We initially made contact with Corey to get a better understanding of his plans and goals for this outcome of the project. Soon after, we realized we needed a lot more information to keep this project rolling. Between in-person interviews, phone calls, emails, we were able to get a hold of a previous professor who worked closely with Lake Baldwin, Daniel Sollenberger. We also reached out to Dr. Vanessa Lane for more information regarding the lake's history and additional guidance on this project. Once a plan was developed, Corey was emailed and updated. After he acknowledged and agreed that the handout and brochure would be the best course of action, our project proposal was submitted. Shortly after the project proposal submission, Shelby and I began work on the brochure and handout along with recording this video. Both the project and final project will be due on October 30th. Since this project is hypothetical and we will not be printing out any of the brochures or handouts, we will be giving all the information to Corey, and he's actually going to be using this for his informational project for his own housing groups. One of our issues that has made itself extremely clear is simply getting the attention of students, and apparently the signs are not doing the job. As Shelby will shortly talk about, the signage is not the only problem. That is why we want to take another route. The reason we wanted to create a handout and brochures was to create more ways for the information to be viewed. We can disperse handouts by sliding them underneath doors, putting them underneath windshield wipers, inserting them in welcome packages, and so on to educate students and catch their attention. Also, hanging posters in the dorms and class buildings of areas that are frequently viewed. Since Corey works in housing, he has also already pre-approved the handouts being on the bulletin boards. This is very critical because many students view ABAC, Lake Baldwin, as a place to fish, take pets swimming, and enjoy the views. They're not really realizing the rules and regulations along with what goes into managing Lake Baldwin.
Fortunately, we did not have many issues that we ran into. One of the ones that we did have was the signs that are around the lake. The two that are out there are supposed to be out there have incorrect information, as well as one of them is missing, and according to Corey, it's been missing for several years now. When you look at the signs, there's some information on them that is incorrect and needs to be updated. On the sign, it states that in order for you to fish, you have to have a license obtained from the Forestry and Wildlife Society clubs. However, that is no longer true because the Wildlife Club is not doing those licenses. But since it is state-owned property, you still have to obtain a fishing license through Georgia and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. The other issue that we have had is finding out a deeper history of the lake, and we only had a small source of list for the history. We also had a few issues getting in touch with Mr. Sollenberger due to his email being messed up through work, and we had no other contact information for him. Thankfully, we were able to talk to a current professor who was able to email him and text him to get him back in contact with us.
The rules and regulations have been set prior to this project. Fishing is restricted to ABAC students only. Guests and visitors are not permitted along with faculty and staff. You may fish from daylight to dark. The bait allowed is artificial lures, worms, and crickets. However, bait fish are not permitted. The creel limits are brim any size, quantity of 25, bass over 12 inches, quantity of 4. All other bass must be returned to the lake. You must secure a fishing license through the state of Georgia. Swimming is not permitted. Boating is not permitted unless otherwise approved for a class or supervised group. And the regulations are strictly enforced. And I must reinforce that this lake is state property and patrolled by the Georgia Game Warden, who can and will write tickets to enforce the law.
Lake Baldwin, unfortunately, is not a funded project, or does it get a budget allotted to it every year. So the only work that is done to it is through the Wildlife Society Club. In the past, the lake has been limed and fertilized, but the last time it was done was several years ago. This is for multiple reasons. One being that a few years ago, the baseball field was limed and fertilized, and a lot of it came out in the runoff, which drained into Lake Baldwin and caused a huge algae bloom and fish kill-off. The other reason is because it is expensive to do this, and there is no money allotted to lake management, like I said. In the past, to fertilize the lake, they have used a boat and a fertilizer spreader, as you can see in the picture below. However, this process causes the spreader and the boat to have some erosion issues, costing more money and to have it fixed. To solve this issue, 2 students installed 3 fertilizer platforms. The purpose of the platforms was to be able to place a bag of granular fertilizer on the platform with an X cut into the bag. This allows for a slow release of the fertilizer. They usually place it every year in late winter or early spring in order to promote a plankton bloom. The platforms are still there and usable today. However, some management on them is more than likely needed to have the stability of them checked, as well as one of them repositioned due to the fact that it is currently sitting on its side. The 3 platforms are located next to the fountain, the dock, and the other side of the lake. The other picture that you are seeing are fish structures similar to the ones that were used in Lake Baldwin. The structures are marked by the green and yellow buoys and were placed back in 2013. However, Jason Rhodes snorkeled down to see the condition of the structures, only finding out that there was nothing there. The structures have either become detached from the buoys or have disintegrated and are no longer there. They have also in the past sank a few Christmas trees, but those are more than likely disintegrated and no longer there. The structures were placed in the bottom of the lake so that it gave the lake some dimension and gave the fish an area for them to hide in. Also, a few years back, Georgia DNR came out with their boat during one of the summer sessions and did an electric shock with their boat. They used this as a balance check, sort of like the same way that a steady net does, which I will talk about in a later slide. This only thing different with that is that it sends out an electric field into the water, shocking fish temporarily and allowing a manager to look at the species and checking the health of the fish in the pond. All these are past management practices, and today the only management the lake sees is from the use of the water fountains and a few other class projects done during the summer. They're not only for pretty looks, actually they have a purpose on the lake. They are used to push oxygenated water to the bottom and bring water with hydrogen sulfate to the top and let it be oxygenated and returned back to the bottom. The other management that they do is during the summer session with the fisheries class. They use what is called a seine net, like the one pictured below. It is used to check the ecosystem's balance with fish. The chart below is used to determine what kind of balance is going on. It is performed by two people walking through the edge of the lake, with one of the people standing still and the other walking in a half circle shape, keeping the net tight. Once the person moving has reached the shore, the net is quickly scooped up and walked onto the bank. The fish are counted and inventoried, and the table is referred to determine what the next steps and management action plans should be.
Lake Baldwin wouldn't look as nearly as good as it does without the countless cleanup days conducted by the Wildlife Society and all the students that have volunteered throughout the years to keep the lake maintained. It depends on what action they take throughout the years, but for the most part, they have removed invasive species and woody vegetation, cut and spray. They've removed a lot of alligator weed. They've also picked up trash on the lake and just cleaned up the area. The lake is also used for many competitions, such as Wildlife and Forestry Conclave, and pictured in the middle of the pictures is from the Forestry Conclave a couple years back. The lake is also used by ABAC Housing for Welcome Week activities, shown in the picture on the far left. The students and teachers may also use the lake as a very important teaching factor. I know many of us have been in that lake for some time of the year, either for summer semester or just volunteering in general. As shown on the picture on the left is Dalton Ridgedale checking one of his traps for his senior project. The lake is more than fishing and pretty views. It is constantly used across the board, and students and guests need to be educated on the amenity if they're going to use it. These pictures below are from throughout the years of cleanup. Starting in 2012 on the left, according to Clayton Childress, students removed alligator weed and water primrose from the Lake Baldwin. It was estimated that that dump truck up in the top left picture in a trailer held about 6,000 pounds of alligator weed and water primrose, all loaded by students and other volunteers. Could you imagine? Because that's a lot. The picture in the middle, according to Amanda Shoulder, is students using seine nets and rakes to gather unwanted aquatic vegetation and remove it. Pictured in the middle center is Trey using glyphosate to sprayed on black willows, water willows, eastern baccharis, and tallow tree to prevent regrowth in the future. In the bottom right-hand corner is Dan, the wildlife technician at the moment, cutting down woody vegetation with large persistent roots. The uncontrolled vegetation on the banks of the levee posed a threat to the structure of the dam. These images don't count for everything that has been done, but it does cover a broad type of active management that is going on to help benefit the lake. Future ideas we have for Lake Baldwin is adding signage around the lake. Since ABAC, specifically Lake Baldwin, is used for outside recreation and exercise, adding little signs around the lake for educational points will enhance the learning experience and also enhance the experience of just walking around the lake and letting people look at signs and read a little bit more and having the kids out there learning more about the lake. Also, we want to maybe add kiosks at like Lakeside and ABAC stalls to kind of gather a focus point to teach people more about the sign. A big kiosk does draw in a bigger crowd. Also, we do believe a handout should be more permanent, either the Welcome Week folders or even a newsletter that goes out every semester just to educate people. And if you're not a student in the YOW, you may know little to nothing about the lake. And that is something Shelby and I are trying to get to change. We are not just making a brochure and a handout. We're trying to create grounds to educate people more on what Lake Baldwin is and just create a better structure for learning rules and regulations for Lake Baldwin. So this is our project and our Lake Baldwin proposal for natural resource recreation.
Finally, for the project, we had the sources that we were able to utilize, which were our stakeholder, Corey LaBelle, who is currently the resident life coordinator and for residential education. Daniel Sollenberger for Georgia DNR, who is the former professor of wildlife here and a manager of Lake Baldwin. Finally, Dr. Vanessa Lane, who is an associate professor of ecology and wildlife management here at ABAC.
Thank you for listening to our talk.
Thank you.